Hello everybody, I have another exciting episode for you today. Here are two mango trees I have in my garden, and you can see they're about 10 feet apart. And I'm keeping my mango trees for the most part 10 feet apart. I have some that are 8 feet, and I have some that are a little bit longer. I don't have a big yard, so I have to think about this wisely when I'm planting trees. I know it takes more work to plant trees closely, and the question remains, well, what will happen later on when the trees get big? Will they still produce just as well if you prune them? A good amount of people tell me yes, so that's why I chose high intensity gardening. But there are some people, like the person I'm going to interview today and talk to today, that doesn't think in the long run high intensity gardening is a good idea. Regardless, the best way to find out for sure is to experiment. That's how you learn. So that's what I'm doing here. And check out Alex, who's just like expert on mangoes. He's been planting them for a long time, and see his opinion from what he's doing and how he's doing it.
Well, on this farm we grow about 300 varieties of mangoes, actually more than that. I'm not sure the exact number these days, but it's taken a while to collect that many. But when we started planting new trees on this property in 2014, we planted multiples of some of the varieties that we knew were going to be very popular and very high demand. So at least we tried to do that. And so in this section here was where we started trying to plant more than one of certain kinds of mangoes. And so for instance, this entire row is Angie mango. The row over here is Carrie, which is a very popular mango from Florida. We have actually 10 of them, 10 Carrie trees in a row over here.
So these were planted in 2014?
2014, in the summer of 2014, after we had started planting all these different varieties around the new year in 2014.
Have they been cut back since then, or is
No,
this...
they've been pruned a little bit to shape them, but I mean, in terms of significant pruning, only a few of them have received significant pruning where we've taken out some of the vertical limbs. Most of these have only been tip pruned since they were planted, but some of these we have spaced them very tight, and that was by design, and so they won't necessarily be here permanently. At some point we'll take them out to give the trees that are next to them more space to grow and thrive.
And what was the idea behind that?
Well, we'll get a certain amount of fruit for a period of time from those smaller trees, and then we can remove them and either plant them elsewhere or sell the tree. So, but in the interim, you're using that space that's between those trees, and it just makes economic sense for us. If you're managing them properly, you can do it for a period of years here in Florida. If you're not, the amount of time that you can do that is relatively brief. So.
Well, now in India and other places, they are doing the high-intensity gardening like that, right, but yeah, permanently. They're trying to, at least, like you said.
Yeah, they're trying to, but the thing that you don't hear about too often with these ultra-high-density plantations in other countries, whether it's in India or South Africa or Australia, almost all of them are using plant growth regulators, specifically paclobutrazol, which is illegal to use in the United States on fruit trees, and can cause some serious issues with the long-term growth of the tree if it's over-applied, and it's not very hard to over-apply paclobutrazol. So we don't use paclobutrazol here, obviously, and because of the amount of rainfall that occurs in Florida and the higher humidity, I feel like ultra-high-density plantations here are not necessarily a long-term viable solution unless they're extremely intensely managed.
So you, yeah.
So the other issue is trying to get equipment between the trees, too.
So you think like somebody like Richard Campbell and stuff that's doing his high density stuff seems successful? You think in the long run
well, he's doing it on a relatively small scale. I don't remember how big Richard's property is. But
half an acre to begin with.
Okay, yeah. And a lot of it has to do with what varieties you choose and what rootstocks you're putting them on. But most rootstocks on trees in the Florida nursery trade are not dwarfing rootstocks, and the trees are going to grow at least moderately vigorously, but variety selection has a lot to do with it, and the trees that we planted in that kind of spacing were varieties that are much slower growing than most. So, and plus we manage them intensely, so a lot of people aren't going to do that. So
definitely not for commercial, but for small personal farms.
Yeah, I think it could be done for a period of time. I don't know whether you can permanently do that and expect the trees to be very productive year after year after year. You might, if you're trying to fight the tree's size in the long run, end up with inconsistent production. At least that's what I think.
Okay.
Well, we'll see how long we can get away with some of it, and I'll show you some of our trees.
So for the meantime, you planted these. How far apart did you plant them?
Originally, these were 16 feet apart.
16
we ended
feet.
up planting. We ended up interplanting them every 8 feet. But
So-
that's on this row. On the next rows, these were 16 feet apart, and they're still 16 feet apart. Now we're 20 feet between the rows.
So this is the row where you got them 8 feet apart,
Yeah.
and then as they grow, you'll take one out in the middle.
In fact, we're going to be taking some of these out this year. So like this one's coming out this year, and you know, because they're already growing into one another, so it's almost like a hedge. And ideally, we don't really want that, because you can see how this part of the tree, it's not going to have that much fruit, and it's going to impact the quality of fruit that does occur inside there, because it's all going to be in shade. So, you know, but the Angie trees are really productive, and I love this mango. I mean, it's got what we call an Indian Alfonso flavor. So it's got a strong flavor with a lot of spice components, and that can be a little controversial with Americans, but people from India or the West Indies and the Caribbean love this mango, so we sell a lot of it to them.
So in this part of the grove here, where you planted these multiple trees, it's 2014 you planted this Angie.
Yeah.
Did they all start fruiting around the same time? And when?
Yeah, they all started fruiting roughly 2 years later.
2 years
They
later.
were planted as 3-gallon trees.
3 gallons, and in 2 years you were getting.
Oh yeah, we get to fruit in about 2 years from most of the small trees we plant, whether they're 1 or 3-gallon plants. In some instances it takes 3 years. If it's taking longer than that, it's taking a long time for us. You know, in some other places, longer periods of time than that might be typical for trees that get planted at small size.
Now, is this because of your farming the way you do it, or the area, or just?
I give a lot of credit to the location.
Okay.
We are in a very good location for growing mangoes. I would say we're probably in the best place in the United States for doing it. Certainly one of the best places in Florida. You know, we're far enough north that they flower pretty consistently up here, but we're not so far north or west that we freeze. And our microclimate here is a little drier than the rest of Florida, and that makes a huge difference as well. People don't really realize that, and they come here and I tell them that they start behaving differently when you go to the other side of I-95, which is a few hundred yards that direction, and they're like, there's no way it can be that different. But I mean, believe me, the further west you go here, the more difficult it is to grow them. So the location has a lot to do with it. We do take good care of our trees, and we've been, you know, careful about which ones we've planted, you know, quite a few of. And there's some varieties here that we only have 1 tree, and we might always only have 1 tree of that. And in other cases, we had a tree of something and we didn't like the way it performed, so we grafted it over and top worked it. So, but over here was where we tried to do multiple varieties of, or multiple plantings of certain trees. And so most of these trees do really well. And then here's an example right here. So this is a Maha Shinnok mango. We planted a couple of these, and these are doing really well. In fact, I'm probably going to have to prop up the limbs on this, or it's going to break. So a lot of fruit on this tree. So
Now, what do you do with the trees here in terms of spraying them? Do you spray them? Do you?
yeah, we use a couple organic products. I don't like to spray anything that's really harsh because I'm the one that's doing the spraying. So, you know, we've used copper and we've used sulfur and a few other biological fungicides. So, you know, if you don't spray them, you can still get fruit here most of the time. It's just, you know, you might end up getting powdery mildew. One big disease problem we've had here has been bacterial black spot, which is kind of a newer disease. So, you know, but we're kind of on top of it, and we're getting pretty good results.
So how many of these trees did you plant?
Maha Shinnok, we initially, I had a farm in Loxahatchee, and I actually planted dozens of these out there. And we had intended to plant about like 7 or 8 of them here. And what ended up happening was we ended up with mislabeled trees that were supposed to be Maha Shinnok but weren't. So ultimately it came out that we only had 2 Maha Shinnok trees on this farm. This is one of them. There's another one over that direction. They're both loaded with fruit. So these other ones, the fake Maha Shinnoks, we top worked several of those. A few of them we replaced just with new trees because they were kind of small to top work. This is an example here. So this tree was one of those fake Maha Shinnoks, and we took that tree out because it was kind of small and unhealthy, and we replaced it with this, which is a Sessi Love mango. This is a new variety that a lot of people are really excited about. We're really excited about it. And it's a Kerry seedling, but it has like a Indo-Chinese hybrid flavor, we call that. So,
So a new tree like this, do you have these for sale?
oh yeah, we'll have these for sale for sure. We'll have the fruit for sale and we'll have the trees for sale. So,
Great.
yeah.
And so that's newest, so we don't know much about it in terms
We
of...
know a little bit. I mean, we've been growing it long enough to evaluate it enough and come up with some conclusions about it. It's a pretty disease-resistant variety. We like that. We like stuff that we don't have to spray a lot or whatever to get a good crop from them. And so, you know, those are the kind of trees that I personally like to deal with. Things that don't require or aren't too finicky about where they're being grown or, you know, or what they're being fed or whatever. So.
All right, everybody, that was another interview with Alex from Tropical Acres Farm. I'll put his contact information below the video. Whatever you decide to do, high-intensity gardening, planting close together, and working the mango trees or the other trees to keep them as pruned as possible, or to just let it go a little bit bigger. Whatever you decide, plant and grow food. That's the best thing you can do for your health, for your life, and just for everything. So that's another episode, everybody. Put your comments or questions below and keep growing.